Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time for This? The series that looks at old and new video games from indie to AAA and everything in between to help you figure out if you've got the time to play, finish, 100% complete a game, or just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. With it being the spooky month of October, let's take a look at the indie horror hit Crow Country. Set in the now retro time frame of 1990, this game takes us back to old school mechanics and graphics to solve a mysterious disappearance. 2 years prior to the game's beginning, the eccentric millionaire Edward Crow, creator of the popular theme park Crow Country, has gone missing. Now, Agent Mara Forrest attends the park in an attempt to help Mr. Crow's daughter finally find out what happened to her father all those years ago. Providing some tried and tested gameplay loops and a handy pistol to get us started, this indie hit from SFB Games shows us you don't have to fix what isn't broken, and new but small innovations can give a new lease of life to a tired genre. Whilst the graphics are an intentionally blocky throwback that might put some die-hard realism gamers off, there's a lot to gain by prioritizing gameplay and writing over the look of a game. So grab your Tamagotchi, don your finest Power Ranger armor, and let's go see what happens when greed consumes an honest man. Following the intro cinematic, we're greeted with very familiar camera angles, controls, and menus, but it's the small innovations that really sing here in Crow Country. Off the bat, we are offered 3 different difficulty levels to choose from: Exploration Mode to play the game with no threats at all, Survival Horror for the standard experience, or Murder of Crows for the masochists among us. I've always appreciated these kind of options, and though I picked the standard experience as it's the best way to gauge a review, it's nice to know that there's an experience out there accessible to all types of players. The story of Mara investigating the old park is a fun, albeit predictable ride, but the strongest aspect is the actual writing of the characters. I'm not quite sure how to describe the writing here, but it's like every character has the same level of dry wit, with them all being completely oddball characters that act like what they're doing is entirely normal, and you're the weird one for questioning it.
They're weird. No, he's weird. He is really weird. This guy. Can you imagine? I'm weird.
This widely accepted weirdness seems to be even more so in the main character Mara, with small interactions in the world having funny quips, asides, and monologues to make her really feel like a young girl, but you can definitely tell something doesn't quite add up with everyone involved. With the game being framed as you investigating a mystery, the game's humour comes through in spades when doing actual investigating. You're not always rewarded for performing certain actions. Sometimes putting your hand in a hole or picking up an item only gets you hurt or even killed. Whilst the core mystery leaves enough intrigue to keep investigating the abandoned theme park, the core gameplay revolves around the puzzles and the combat. Whilst the puzzles oftentimes can be boiled down to a checklist of things to do, this is actually true of more or less any puzzle-based survival horror game, a great example being the original Resident Evil. However, what makes a good puzzle-heavy horror game is how innovative the developers are in hiding this basic loop. I'm happy to say SFB Games actually do a really great job at hiding what you need and where, oftentimes having something completely random being tied to a puzzle solution. When you're solving a puzzle, it's not just about having the item in question that you need, it's about figuring out how to use it in an innovative way. A very welcome innovation in the puzzle space is the hint machine you can find a few times throughout the game. Taking the guise of a fortune-telling crow, you can take a total of 10 hints across the game as to what you're supposed to do next, with the extra clues if the first one isn't clear enough.
Oh, that's cute.
The happy squirrel.
That's bad?
Possibly. The cards are vague and mysterious.
On my first playthrough, I did use this feature a couple of times, but I never felt like the game was too obscure to complete a good 90% of it without any help. In this respect, the game is quite open, whilst the main path is clear and linear. There are a vast number of extra rooms and secrets for such a small map. Combat is another part of Crow Country which feels like a step back in time, but with a modern twist. Similar to the survival horror games it's based on, Mara cannot move and shoot at the same time. You even keep the overhead camera angle. Moving and aiming intentionally feel tanky, but there are definitely two things which provide a much appreciated relief from the old school frustration. Firstly, when aiming your weapon, you're free to move the reticule essentially anywhere on the screen that you're facing. You have to stop aiming to turn and shoot the other way, but this is a much better way of shooting than the old PS1 days of looking in a direction and hoping you're hitting an enemy off screen. The second bonus on top of this, the more humanoid looking abominations you fight take extra damage from headshots, giving you more of a reason to use this freeform aiming option. All enemies also take damage the closer they are to you when you shoot them, encouraging you to get up close and personal with these horrifically twisted beings. Combat isn't essential in this game though. As with every survival horror, you're encouraged to weigh up resources to see which enemies or bosses you can avoid to save your ammo for more tricky encounters later. As I said earlier, the map in Crow Country is fairly small, most likely due to the budget of the game, but also due to the setting. It's not like you could make a theme park which takes 20 minutes to walk from one site to the other. Fortunately, the map is really well designed and interconnected, with the secret utility corridors and back passages we'd never typically see as a paying customer being open to our savvy detective. As time goes on, traps start to appear in the form of overhead and underfoot hazards, as well as some clever item and gas traps. I do feel like as the game goes on, the level of traps that appear get a little too much, especially when the enemy spawns ramp up and each of these hazards require a single bullet to destroy. A small gripe, and likely the standard Gracious Rhino skill issue,
You triggered my trap card! Power balance!
but I did feel like when you're backtracking through areas a few times, you'll come to regret not taking out a few traps or enemies. Next, let's talk about the park itself. This creepy place looks really run down, with litter and bits of brick and wood everywhere, as if it hadn't been looked after in a long time. Whilst this hints at the real nature of the park, it also provides a great stage for some of the scarier moments of the game. I definitely wouldn't put this up there with Visage or PT, but it does have a few moments up there with the dog jumping through the glass on the OG Resident Evil. Despite the lo-fi graphics, Crow Country doesn't struggle at all with making a believable environment. Set with the 90s colour schemes, bright bold colours and blocky character designs, the titular crows themselves seem to have had a lot of effort put into their design. As you may just see them and say they're blackbirds with big eyes, something about them just stands out to me, and certain ones just seem to stare straight into your soul. Something these old school graphics do suffer from a little bit in my experience was the item placement. For the most part I found ammo and health to be easy to find, but there was the odd grenade or antidote that completely blended in with the environment, and I only really noticed it on a second playthrough of the game. What really stood out to me here were the enemy designs and art style. I won't give away what they are, but rest assured from a lore perspective, the variation of enemies is perfectly explained. At the beginning of the game you'll find mainly humanoid enemies with the occasional small puddle of goop, but by the end you'll see all manner of twisted abominations with contorted limbs and melted faces. There's something about the cartoony art style of them that makes them look kind of lifelike, whilst also making them look completely alien. Almost like they've been modelled out of clay and then subsequently melted by something. To be honest, for the most part, they never really posed any real threat, save for a few tight spaces you can find them in, but the way they lurch towards you whilst you're rooted to the spot to shoot them, knowing you deal extra damage as they get closer, was a spot-on design decision from SFB Games. The soundtrack finds a way to emulate the creepy off vibe of the old school survival horror games too, implementing piano with synth to make a creepy carnival vibe for the main theme, with more toned down instrumentals for characters and cutscenes. Like with most horror games, the atmosphere is heavily carried by the soundtrack, and I'm happy to say Crow Country nails this. So let's get down to it. How long does this game take? In my first playthrough, getting all of the secrets and optional achievements took me around 5 hours. When I played a second playthrough for the final achievement, this took me to nearly 8 hours. If you rush through, not worrying about secrets and skipping a lot of combat encounters, or use a guide to know where to go, you could comfortably finish this game in around 4 hours. Full completion, alongside some extra content following your first playthrough, it'll be around 8 hours. Once you've completed the game, you'll unlock extra items and weapons based on a rank, provided you played on the survival horror or murder of crow difficulties. These bonuses can be turned off and on in the menu at any time, and don't impact achievements, which is great for encouraging at least one replay. You also unlock something called Crystal Crows after your first go around, which are essentially collectibles you have to break throughout the park. For the time spent, I'd say with it being a small indie game with a low price tag of £16 or $20, this is definitely worth your time. The map is quite small but perfectly handcrafted, so you're never far from a safe room. When it comes to the end of game ranking, the number of times you save doesn't affect your overall rank, encouraging you to stop and start as often as you like. Perfect for those with only shorter play sessions available. I definitely recommend playing through this in one go if you can, in order to keep the pacing and atmosphere at a maximum, but if you split it across 2 play sessions like I did, you'll still have a great time. I recommend Crow Country to fans of survival horror and mystery games. It's definitely not a game for everyone, but those who are raised on these types of games will definitely get a lot out of it. If you're looking for action-heavy, monster-a-minute pacing, you'll not find that here, but if you're after a tightly paced, oddball comedy horror with a few scares thrown in for good measure, this game's definitely for you. There aren't a huge variety of weapons and the map is small, but for the price you pay, SFB Games absolutely nails their homage to old-school survival horror with a unique spin on the genre. Their innovations in this space let it stand out from other Resident Evil and Silent Hill imitators you see on game stores these days. It's not enough to emulate what once was great, you need to do something fresh to truly stand out. I'm eagerly looking forward to SFB Games' next project, and whilst it's not likely to be another entry in the Crow Country IP, this oddball humour and fantastic art style has me feeling comfortable I'll like whatever comes next. Do you think you have time for Crow Country? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game alongside a bit more of a deep dive on the time you have to invest, so you know what you're getting into, because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you subscribe, I'm looking to put out regular content like this alongside some more in-depth video essays and freeform videos, so stick around, and if you have any requests on future videos, just drop them in the comments. And finally, if you want to come chat with me, you can find me over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.